Hi, I'm Joseph Crudup, and welcome to my storybook. Today, this is the part 6 of this one, and the book called Coretta Scott King. This is going to be the part 6 of this one, and I'm going to continue to read it and read it. Let's begin. Chapter 8. What are you afraid of? Trashing the king snapping on the heels of a trumpet. What career in my life with Martin Luther King Jr. Describing what occurred in Birmingham on September 15, 1963. Just weeks after Martin's trumpet speech in Washington, D.C., the 16th Baptist Street Baptist Church in Atlanta was burned. 4 young girls were killed. That June, Margaret Evers, head of the NAACP in Memphis, Mississippi, and a friend of Martin's had been shot to death in his own doorway. Even as she and Martin enjoyed how won trumpets, incidents such as these were horrifying reminders of Coretta of how much what was still to be done. She was at home with Martin and the children in Atlanta when an event that shattered the crown of the entire nation was reported on television. President John F. Kennedy was shot during a trip to Dallas, Texas. It was November 22nd, 1963. Coretta was taken to a friend on a telephone. Martin was upstairs watching television. His heart sank as he listened to the report from Dallas. Coretta, Martin yelled, I just heard the President Kennedy has been shot, maybe killed. Coretta hung up to the phone and rushed upstairs. The Kings watched the news in silence. The update there was the Darien finally came. The president was dead. Martin and Coretta looked at each other in disbelief. The loss of President Kennedy was a devastating blow both personality and popularity. The president had been an ally in the nonviolent movement and a supporter of the SCLC's goals in troubling times. This is what is going to happen to me also. Martin finally said in a flat voice, I keep telling you, this is a sick psychology. Coretta stared at her husband. Coretta stared at her husband. There was nothing she could say. She simply held her husband's hand. I felt he was right, she admitted later. Martin became desperate for a time after the assassination, leaving Atlanta only to attend the president's funeral in Washington, D.C. Kennedy had been killed just as he was trying to pass civil rights legislation through Congress. But on July 2nd, 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson, the former vice president, signed Kennedy's civil rights bill into law. Martin was one of the several black civil and religious leaders invited to the White House to witness the event. The president gave Martin one of the pens he had used to sign the documents. King's first meeting with Johnson helped reassure him that the new president was on the side of the civil rights. The SCLC purposed forward with a voter registration campaign in Selma, Alabama, a city 30 miles from Coretta's hometown, where 15,000 blacks were able to vote, but only 383 were registered. The SNCC had tried to among grassroots campaign there the previous year, but the summer police had clamped down on the voter education classes they had in local schools and churches. Throughout the summer and early fall of 1964, Martin continued to travel to Germany and to the Vatican for the private indictments with Pope Paul the, Pope Paul the Sixth and to help the SCLCs and SNCC with their voter registration drive. Coretta was busy giving freedom concerts, but she was not too busy to worry about Martin's health, and she convinced him to go to an Atlanta hospital for a complete checkup in October. Soon after Martin was admitted, Coretta received a call from a report we had exciting news. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had won the Nobel Peace Prize for 1964. The award is one of the most prestigious honors in the world, fallen by the estate of the late Swiss individual of Central Bank of Sweden. Nobel Peace Prize winners are selected by the Nobel Winner Committee on the basis of their outstanding efforts to bring peace to human mankind. At only 35, Martin was the longest person ever to have received the award. In addition to the honor of being selected, Martin won a cash prize of $54,000. Coretta immediately called Martin at the hospital. Here's the Nobel Peace Prize winner for 1964 failing this morning. She asked her dangerous husband. He thought he was still dreaming. Once he had realized that Coretta's news was no dream, Martin set up a press conference at the hospital. The SCLC office called Coretta and gave her the details. She was at his side in the hospital as Martin humbly thanked the Nobel Committee for giving him the world's greatest humanitarian award. He pleaded to spend the entire cash prize on events in several ways. A few days later, Martin left the hospital with a clean bill of health. The King's family and journalists made preparations for the trip to Norway for the award ceremony. A group of local ministers paid for plane tickets for Martin's parents, although the children were anxious to go. No one under age 12 was allowed at the ceremony. Before flying to Norway, Coretta flew to New York on November 14 to begin another of series of national freedom concerts to raise money for the SCLC. She performed an 8-part composition called The Story of the Struggle from 1955 to 1965 at New York City's Town Hall. Her rendition of the story was said to raise $6,000 for the movement. In early December, she performed a second concert in New Jersey. She then returned to Atlanta to accompany her husband and a group of 30 family members and friends in Norway to see Martin receive the Nobel Peace Prize. During a stop in London, Martin preached a sermon at St. Paul's Cathedral on December 8. The Kings arrived in Oslo, Norway, and were greeted by officials from the Nobel Committee. 2 days later, in a ceremony at Oslo University, King Olav V of Norway President Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with the Nobel Peace Prize, a gold medal, a scarf, and a cash prize. After the ceremony, family and friends gathered at the King's Hotel salute to toast Martin with the campaign. It was an emotional high point of Martin and Coretta's life together. Meanwhile, voting registration campaigns in Selma, Alabama, and nearby mall will become dangerous and bloody. One protest march led to the death of the lone black man who once was a childhood friend of Coretta's. On February 26, 1965, Jeremy Lee Jackson died of a gunshot wound he had sustained 8 days earlier when he was trying to protect his mother from the attack by a state trooper. On February 1st, shortly before Jackson's death, Martin and Alberti were jailed in Selma. They spent 5 days in prison because they refused to pay bail. Every attempt the SCLC made to register black voters were thwarted. Senator Miller, the chief of police, and Governor George Wallace did all they could to break down the campaign. Coretta and Janelle Ability went to Salmon during their husband's imprisonment. Soon after their arrival, Coretta learned the former black Muslim leader Malcolm X was in the local African Methodist Episcopal Church, and that he had roughly the Belgrade demonstrators with his message, which, which condoned retaliation and violence. Coretta entered the church and took a turn addressing the crowd, stressing the importance of nonviolence. When she met Malcolm, Coretta found him apologetic about any difficulty his princess had caused that day. He also expressed regret at not being able to visit Martin in jail. The assassination of Malcolm X on February 21st, 1965, a short time after their meeting, left Coretta both sadly and embarrassingly towards some of the Syrian leaders' beliefs, which had been more specialist than those of Martin and the SCLC. On March 5th, Martin flew to Washington, D.C., and informed President Johnson that the campaign would not succeed without a federal voting rights bill to eliminate discriminatory laws. The president assured Martin that he would draft such a bill. The next day, police, under the command of Samuel's sheriff, Jim Clark, attacked more than 150 black students who were demonstrating peacefully outside a city courthouse. Clark's men forced the students to go up to John's tours and jail 6 miles outside of town, shackling them repeatedly with electric scalpels to keep them going at a fast clip. Secondly, by the events in Salem, Martin announced that the SCLC would sponsor a march from Salem to Montgomery, and this is all of over 50 miles, to force Governor Wallace to rein in the police and to demand justice at the ballot box. The first march, with Martin organizing but did not lead, took place on Sunday, March 7, 1965. But as over 500 marchers reached the Indianapolis Bridge on their way to Montgomery, they were greeted by barrels of hostility, Alabama state troopers, and mounted cavalrymen who ordered them to turn back. When they refused, they were chased back and introduced to Calipows. The protesters now faced brutal beatings, lashing with bullwhips and being trampled under the horses and shocked with tear gas. Coretta got word or hit this. Coretta got war on display Sunday, just before giving a freedom concert in San Francisco as part of the Six City West Coast tour. When Martin called her later, he was upset that his followers had suffered so much in his balance. He planned to personally another march that Tuesday with rough ability at his side. But Alabama officials had gotten a federal injunction against the scheduling march. Coretta supported Martin's plans to march, although she knew he faced great danger. She also called the children in Atlanta to ensure that their father was all right. On March 9th, roughly half of the 1,500 marchers were following King from Salem were white. The ones striking in similarly between this march and the tragic attempt made 2 days earlier remaining. They were again met by a blockade of troopers and horsemen at the Inman Prison Bridge. After the tense silence, King ordered the marchers to turn back, although he faced much criticism for his decision. It probably invented needless bloodshed. President Johnson had been watching the developments in Selma. The injunction against marching from Selma to Montgomery was left, and Johnson overruled Governor Wallace, taking control of the Alabama National Guard and sending them to protect the civil rights marchers. On March 24th, Martin, the SCLC leadership, and dozens of supporters left Selma for Montgomery on a 4-day march. Coretta, Coretta, who had a speaking engagement at Minot College in North Carolina that day, joined Martin on the second day of the march. The marchers sang gospel songs and chanting, "We want freedom" for miles on a track that was pushed to by rain and mud. When they reached the Montgomery, the marchers passed that Surrender Baptist Church, the site on March's first presidential, and came to the steps of the state capitol. On August 6, 1965, President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, compounded with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Voting Rights Act signing the dismissal of the certain system of racial discrimination that had excelled slavery. That far, Coretta enrolled located in Marty, in one of the best all-white public schools in Atlanta. The King Jr. did not want to be the only two black children in school, so Coretta convinced Janina's ability to resign her 3 children in the Spring Street School as well. The school's principal made them feel welcome, but made it clear that she did not want voter reporters looking around her school. But outside the school, Coretta was very open with the bill about the King family's decision to help integrate Atlanta's school system. There was one time when Coretta wanted the entire nation to see her children walking in their father's footsteps. The SCLC's victories in its second campaigns, impressive as they were, merely scratching the surface of racism in the nation. In larger cities throughout the North, blacks also suffered, living in ghettos that separate them from the mainstream of American life. Black families often struggled for survivors in campaign housing projects regulated by city landlords. Blacks also had little access to indigenous health care or social service. The Weber employment among Northern Umber blacks were high compared to other racial groups. In the cases at predominantly black public schools was usually referring to that offering by schools in all white neighborhoods and school buildings in ghettos or areas were frequently distributed and poorly equally. In June 1966, the Kings moved to Chicago to raise a war against umber poverty. The SCLC led a mass march to the city hall in July. When the marchers reached their demonstrations, Martin nailed a list of demands from Mayor Richard Daley onto the door. It was a symbolic gesture that recalled his namesake Martin Luther Nelly and the 95 days to the door at Germany's University of Wittenberg in 1517. Keynes lists outlasting demands for fairness in public housing and for the integration of white neighborhoods. Coretta and all the children marched with Martin on this historic day. The next day, however, was less auspicious. Milton Daly, having revealed Martin's list of demands, dismissed them all in a meeting that morning. As news of the decision spread discouragement, Horn introduced the proposal summer air in the ghetto. Life in a Chicago public housing unit was a jarring adjustment for the King's family. Coretta knew with grim excitement that the lowland had his brother printed the apartment in anticipation of his famous tenement, but the hallway still regularly wanted. The plumbing and heating was still suspended, and there was nothing green in sight. As far as playgrounds for children were concerned, the evening after Martin's meeting with Milo Daly, he and Coretta were driving to another meeting. They saw a crowd of young people riding in the street. Police told them that some neighborhood children had turned on the fire hydrants to cool themselves. When police shut off the hydrants, the kids started drawing walls and breaking windows. Then, local gangs got involved. Shooting started, and the violence escalated. Coretta, Martin, and SCLC leaders spent that night on the streets of Chicago, trying to find the deeper causes of the riot and to promote nonviolence. Fortunately, the children were already visiting with friends that night, scattering riots stretched into the next day. During which Coretta spoke at the women's meeting at the local YWCA, I was supposed to talk about unity, but that was hardly the day before it. The day for it, she recalled in her autobiography, the neighborhood women share her mood. When it was suggested that they sent a telegram to Mala Daly urging him to support the SCLC's list of fair housing demands. Many of them were relocated to sign it. Coretta guessed that perhaps their husband held shady jobs and the women feared that they could be fouled. What are you afraid of? Coretta finally asked. There comes a time when we have to make a decision and we have to make a choice. The woman responds by not only signing the telegram, but also by forming the intelligence organization which came to be known as Women Mobilizing for Change, dedicated to improving the local living conditions. In time, the group's membership grew to over 1,000 women. The writing continued the next day. Coretta had to deliver another speech, and this time she took the children with her. They then went out the chaos in their small apartment without Martin, who was out among the people trying to restore order. After the writing ended, two black people, one of them a 14-year-old girl, was dead. The SCLC decided to make integrating Chicago's housing its top priority. Marches into all-white, working-class neighborhoods was scheduled. Marlon Daly, who was up for re-election, worried that he would lose the support of white voters if such marches were held. But Martin moved forward in his fight to make safe, clean housing a reality for his people. Martin personally laid a mosque onto Miss Crudup Park on August 5th, 1966. That day, 600 people, including many whites, followed him through Chicago's white communities. The residents' response was horrifying. People threw rocks and bottles at the marshals. Some shouted insults like, "You know what, coon, and go back to Africa." Martin later told Coretta that he had never experienced such intense heat, not even in the Deep South. During the march, he was hit in the head with a rock. On August 26th, Marlon Daly and heads of several cities agencies finally agreed to call a truce with the SCLC. The Marlon felt that official mock shooting by the SCLC ran later with his white supporters and incited into mayhem in the streets. The shooter agreed to register its financial and social resources to improve living conditions in the ghettos and to integrate all white communities. When Martin and Coretta left Chicago, the city's black residents had hope for better lives. In 1967, Martin's lifelong dedication to nonviolent and Christian love was chosen when he decided to denounce Americans' involvement in the Vietnam War. Thousands of miles away, lone American soldiers were fighting and dying in a bitter war putting South Vietnam against North Vietnam and the communist rebels its support. The United States had backed the South Vietnamese government since the late 1950s, but its military mission was taking a dreamful toll in human lives and American tax dollars. Specifically, King knowing that the government spent far more money in pursuit of a single $5 cautionary than it would cost to help a single poor person in this country. Furthermore, this disproportionate number of lone American soldiers dying in Vietnam were poor blacks who could not avoid the drought. And now so that continues year after year to spend more on military defense than on programs of social uplift in its opposing spiritual depth. Martin said in a speech before a group a cameraman at Riverside Church in New York City that April. Coretta agreed with him. She had actively participated in a peace movement for years and was glad to see Martin beginning to embrace a worldwide push for peace as part of the nonviolent fundamentalists. But many black civil rights leaders criticized Martin for shifting his attention away from the black struggle for equality. Also, some black some blacks agree with the U.S. government's pursuit on Vietnam, so he recently alienated them from the civil rights movement. These criticisms notwithstanding, Martin's call for peace in Vietnam fell on deaf ears. Throughout the summer of 1967, riots broke out in many U.S. cities. Blacks were dissatisfied with the guardrail piece of the nonviolent movement. Many whites, on the other hand, felt threatened by the incremental progress of civil rights laws. Martin himself was frustrated in his search of new ways of bringing people together. His answer was the Poor People's Campaign in an attempt together to organize the nationalist poor, regardless of race, from 10 cities and 5 rural towns in a mass protest to demand economic security, district sanitary housing, and quality education for every American. The protesters, who built a tent city in the heart of Washington, D.C., to demonstrate their plight. The nonviolent movement was slowly shifting its focus from a civil rights struggling into the human rights struggles. In February 1968, the Sensational Workers Union in Memphis, Tennessee, went on strike to protest unfair treatment by the mail. The preliminary black union had tried for several weeks to launch a mass march, but the city's police were blocking their every move. A union leader and SCLC contract in Memphis called Martin and asked him to help the garbage collectors mount a protest. He'd agreed to help, but the event was a disaster. Martin arrived in Memphis to discover the march already in progress and terribly undescapable, undescapably, with no lines forming and some of the marchers invocated violence. It was violence that brought the protest to an abrupt halt. One man was shot during the freezing. Martin returned to Atlanta to recover from the turmoil. He was deeply troubled. It was the first time extreme disorder had occurred during a march under his leadership. He wanted to go back to Memphis as soon as possible to prove that nonviolent tactics could work. Other SCLC leaders disagreed. They felt that Martin should direct his energies towards the Poor People's Campaign. Martin's associates also worried about his safety. The discussion over his next project turned into a heated debate. SCLC staff members were eager to move on. Martin, however, was determined to make things right in Memphis. Not only was he troubled by the prospect of the lost battle in Memphis, he was now deeply saddened by the division among his own staff. Martin is extremely depressed, and Collison has told Coretta during a phone call she was in Washington, D.C., attending a press conference for the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. She had heard about the trouble in Memphis and called to check on Martin. But back in Atlanta, Martin soon pulled himself together, and the SCLC made plans to return to Memphis. On Wednesday, April the 3rd, Coretta awoke before dawn to cook breakfast for Martin and Alberti before their trip to the airport. The two men were tense. They knew that going back to Memphis was a risky endeavor. Alberti kept looking at his watch. Martin fumbled around the house, trying to get dressed in time to catch their 7 o'clock flight. Neither man ate any of the breakfast Coretta had prepared. When Coretta later recalled kissing her husband goodbye, she described it as a farewell, like dozens of other times before. The two men dashed into Umberto's car, and Coretta watched them drive down the street as the sun peeking over the horizon. She would never see Martin alive again. In Memphis that evening, he stood before a crowd of 2,000 supporters outside a church. Martin told the crowd that he will lead a second march on April the 8th, and despite a federal injunction that the city has secured to stop the protest, he said the march. He said the march was more than a demonstration for local garbage collections. It was a public testament to the moral justice of nonviolence and proof that no evil could match the Christianity belief is the power of love. He told the crowd that his flight was delayed that morning for the bomb shots. He shared with them his knowledge of threats against his life. But Martin assured them that knowing this would make him retreat to Atlanta. Then, as Coretta worked in my life with Martin Luther King Jr., the message of providence seemed to disagree upon Martin. Like everybody else, I would like to live a long life, he said in his speech against the Atlanta backdrop of a spring storm that was raining outside. Lovely his place, but I'm not concerned with that now. I just want to do God's will. Friends and associates were told Coretta that Martin's sense of humor had returned on April the 4th after his somber speech of the previous night. He was lightning and joked around with his brother, A.D. Ability, Andrew Long, and other SCLC members in his room at the Lonely Motel. Martin and A.D. even calmed down mother in Atlanta to share a few laughs. Later that evening, Martin, Ability, and the local minister named Samuel B. Cowles decided to go out to dinner before attending a civil rights meeting. When Cowles headed down to the hotel parking lot and Ability went back into the room, Martin stood alone on the balcony. He was fairly shocked in an instant. That will be the end of the part 8. Chapter 9 is tomorrow. Chapter 8 is finished, and I'll learn more about this story on Chapter 9 on Coretta Scott King. Until then, I'm Joseph Crudup. God bless, and enjoy, and be safe.